they call themselves the Builders. For centuries, their symbols have marked cathedrals, dollar bills, and government buildings. But behind the elegant geometry of compasses and squares lies a secret far deeper than most could imagine. This is not just the story of a fraternal order born in the age of stone and mortar. This is the story of power, hidden, inherited, and meticulously preserved by a society that never stopped shaping the world from the shadows. The origins of Freemasonry are usually presented as harmless, a guild of stonemasons in medieval Europe, dedicated to craft, morality, and brotherhood. But that's just the official narrative. Beneath that veneer, researchers have long whispered about another version, one where the Masons were not just builders of cathedrals, but builders of systems, political, financial, and even spiritual. By the 18th century, the Masonic network had already spread across Europe like veins beneath the skin of empires. Kings, philosophers, and revolutionaries, all bound by secret oaths, secret handshakes, and a belief that knowledge itself was power. When America declared independence in 1776, at least 9 of the signers of the Declaration were confirmed Freemasons. George Washington himself took his presidential oath on a Masonic Bible. Coincidence? Perhaps. But historians like Manly P. Hall warned that the founding of the United States was not just a rebellion, it was an initiation ritual on a national scale. To understand the Freemasons' reach, you have to follow the symbols. The all-seeing eye, the unfinished pyramid, they are not random decorations. The Eye of Providence, now printed on every US dollar bill, has its roots in Masonic iconography. According to one theory, it represents the great architect of the universe, a deity that transcends all religions but demands order and hierarchy. In Masonic teachings, the great architect is not worshipped in a church but obeyed in the design of civilization itself. Now imagine this. What if the American experiment was their design all along, a perfect structure built to control chaos through illusion? Freedom on the surface, obedience beneath. By the mid-19th century, Masonic lodges had become centers of influence across the world. In London, Paris, and Washington, D.C., members included scientists, bankers, and politicians. But by then, new factions had emerged, some pursuing enlightenment, others seeking domination. Out of these internal divisions rose darker offshoots, secret circles that fused Masonic traditions with occult rituals and economic ambition. One of them, as some claim, evolved into what later became the Illuminati. Officially, the Bavarian Illuminati was banned in 1785. Unofficially, its ideals, the control of knowledge, manipulation of religion, and orchestration of global events, lived on, rebranded under Masonic principles. And the deeper you dig, the more unsettling the connections become. Take, for example, the construction of Washington, D.C. itself. Pierre-Charles L'Enfant, the French architect who designed the Capitol, was a known Freemason. The city's grid, when viewed from above, reveals patterns unmistakably aligned with Masonic geometry, pentagrams, squares, and intersecting diagonals that point directly to the Capitol and the White House. Coincidence again? Or a carefully coded message to those who knew how to read it? Even the cornerstone of the Capitol building was laid in a full Masonic ceremony on September 18, 1793, attended by George Washington in his Masonic apron. He poured corn, wine, and oil over the stone, the same ritual used in ancient temples to bless the foundation of power. For centuries, they've claimed it's all symbolic. But what if those symbols are more than decoration? What if they are keys, markers of an ongoing project that continues into the 21st century? Modern researchers have begun tracing Masonic influence through the financial systems of the world. The Federal Reserve, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund all trace their origins to committees and councils where Freemasons were disproportionately represented. Even today, many of the world's central bankers and corporate elites belong to private lodges or societies that share Masonic roots. The language of balance, structure, and enlightenment echoes the same teachings found in 18th-century lodge manuals. And then there's the architecture, literal architecture. The United Nations headquarters in New York, the European Parliament in Strasbourg, and the Supreme Court building in Washington all incorporate Masonic proportions, sacred geometry, and astronomical alignments. Every line, every angle seems designed not for beauty but for meaning, a silent language spoken only by initiates. To the casual observer, it's easy to dismiss all this as coincidence or symbolism. But those who've studied the rituals, the meetings, and the coded correspondence between high-ranking members say otherwise. One chilling testimony comes from a former diplomat named Richard McKenna, who claimed in a 1992 interview that international policy decisions were sometimes made not in boardrooms, but in lodges. He described closed-door gatherings where political leaders discuss global strategy under the guise of fraternal fellowship. It's not about ideology, McKenna said. It's about alignment. They align the world the same way they align their symbols, by design, not by chance. Every great war, every financial collapse, every sudden rise of a new political order, all, he believed, were part of a single unfolding blueprint, but the deeper question remains, to what end? Some scholars argue that the Freemasons' ultimate goal has never been domination but perfection, the completion of what they call the great work. In alchemical terms, it's the purification of humanity, the transformation of society into a new, enlightened order. But others warn that this so-called enlightenment demands sacrifice, the surrender of individual freedom for the illusion of harmony. And if that's true, then perhaps the symbols on the dollar bill aren't there to celebrate freedom at all. Maybe they are warnings, hidden in plain sight, about who truly holds the compass. As we move deeper into the 21st century, the fingerprints of this brotherhood remain everywhere, in politics, finance, and even technology. Silicon Valley billionaires hold private retreats with rituals eerily reminiscent of Masonic initiation. World leaders gather at secretive conferences like the Bilderberg Group, where decisions affecting billions are made behind closed doors. They claim it's just networking. But history has taught us that whenever power hides, it hides for a reason. In the next chapter, we'll follow the trail from the temples of the past to the boardrooms of today, uncovering how a centuries-old order may have engineered not just nations, but the digital empire we live in now. Because if the Freemasons truly were the architects of the old world, perhaps they've also built the foundations of the new one. If the Freemasons were once the hidden architects of empires, then today their influence has evolved, invisible, yet embedded in every system we use. The old temples of stone have been replaced by temples of data, and their pillars are no longer marble but algorithms. It began quietly, decades ago, when secrecy changed its form. The age of the lodge and the oath gave way to the age of the network and the code. What was once transmitted in ritual and symbol now flows through fiber optic cables and encrypted channels. But the principle remains the same: control through knowledge, order through design. To understand this transformation, we have to return to the 20th century, to the years following World War II. The global order was being rebuilt. The United Nations was formed, the World Bank established, and intelligence agencies like the CIA and MI6 emerged as the new tools of invisible governance. Many of the men who helped shape this post-war world shared something curious in common: Masonic connections. In 1946, at a private gathering in London, representatives from financial and political circles met to discuss what they called a unified architecture for peace. Among them were prominent Freemasons from Britain, France, and the United States. The result of that meeting would eventually evolve into the Bretton Woods system, the foundation of modern global finance. It was a system built, quite literally, on Masonic ideals, balance, hierarchy, and secrecy. But power never stays static. The same people who built financial empires began to see the potential of something even greater: information. In the 1960s, as computers moved from military labs to corporate offices, a new breed of architects emerged: engineers, scientists, and entrepreneurs who spoke the new language of power, code. Many of them were children or grandchildren of men who had once sat in lodges, and though they wore no aprons or rings, their belief in structure, secrecy, and enlightened order echoed the same Masonic creed. One of the most fascinating connections appeared in Silicon Valley's early years. The original investors behind major computing projects, including those that would evolve into Google and IBM's research divisions, included members of elite societies that traced their symbols and rituals back to Masonic traditions. They spoke openly about building a new world and reshaping human consciousness through information. The dream of a digital architecture was not about freedom of expression, as the public was told. It was about mapping humanity itself, creating a lattice of data through which behavior, belief, and even emotion could be predicted and directed. In Masonic allegory, every stone must fit perfectly into the grand design. In digital terms, every user must fit perfectly into the algorithm. By the late 1990s, the internet had become the new cathedral, vast, interconnected, and full of symbols. The all-seeing eye no longer sat above the pyramid, it stared back at you from your screen. The great architect no longer required temples or rituals. The architecture itself, the code, became sacred. Consider the rise of global surveillance programs like PRISM, Echelon, and the Five Eyes Alliance. The very language used in their documentation, structure, hierarchy, watchfulness, mirrors centuries-old Masonic concepts. Behind their creation were men who met not just in government halls, but in private clubs that practiced the same oaths of secrecy once sworn in candlelit lodges. Of course, to most people, Freemasonry today seems harmless, a fading social club of old men with cryptic rings and secret handshakes. But insiders say otherwise. In private, the modern Masonry movement has shifted from architecture and politics to technology and finance, a merger of old power and new tools. One whistleblower, who identified himself only as Orion, claimed in 2015 that a Masonic think tank known as the Arcane Council operates quietly within major corporations in Silicon Valley. According to him, this council influences decisions on data privacy, artificial intelligence, and even the algorithms that shape online information. Their goal, he said, is the same as it was in the 18th century, to guide humanity toward what they call the Great Work. But now they do it with code instead of stone. If that's true, then what we're witnessing is not a conspiracy in the traditional sense, it's an evolution of one. From cathedrals to currencies to computers, the same blueprint, adjusted for a new age. Let's look at one more piece of the puzzle, the architecture of global influence. The World Economic Forum in Davos, the Bilderberg Group, and the Trilateral Commission, all modern gatherings of elite decision-makers. Many of their founding members were confirmed Freemasons. Even their rituals, closed-door meetings, symbolic speeches about rebuilding, and their obsession with the term architecture of the future reflect unmistakable Masonic lineage. At the 2018 Davos Summit, one speech in particular stood out. A CEO of a major tech conglomerate described the internet as a living cathedral built by humanity, overseen by unseen hands. It was meant as a metaphor. But to those who know the symbols, it sounded more like a confession. The Masonic motto Ordo ab Chao, order out of chaos, has never been more relevant. In the modern world, chaos is data. Every conflict, every crisis, every scandal generates information, and whoever controls that information controls the narrative, and thus, the future. When social media platforms decide what you see and what you don't, that's not freedom. It's design. When financial algorithms decide which markets rise and fall, that's not randomness. It's structure. And when artificial intelligence begins to learn human behavior, predict emotion, and even shape opinion, that's not evolution. It's orchestration. To the Masonic mindset, this is perfection. A world that runs itself, orderly, predictable, harmonious. A new form of enlightenment, where every human is both participant and prisoner in a digital temple. But what if the great work was never meant to end? What if perfection was just another illusion, a goal that keeps the builders building forever? Researchers have noticed a disturbing pattern. The deeper humanity dives into digital integration, the more physical control we lose. Data replaces experience. Algorithms replace intuition. The builders are no longer human, they are self-learning systems, trained on centuries of coded hierarchy. And somewhere behind those systems, the descendants of the original architects still watch, still guide, still adjust the blueprint. In 2021, a leaked set of internal documents from a private think tank called the New Dawn Institute revealed a proposal titled Project Solomon. It outlined a plan to create a unified global governance model based on AI-driven decision-making. The emblem on the document's cover? A compass and square, subtly embedded in the design of a stylized globe. No one ever claimed responsibility for it. The institute dissolved a year later. Coincidence? Maybe. But the pattern repeats. Look closely at the logos of major institutions, banking groups, technology corporations, international organizations. The geometry speaks: triangles, circles, eyes, compasses, pillars. Always the same forms, hidden in plain sight. Most people see only design, initiate see declaration. The builders never stopped marking their work. Even Hollywood, the world's dream factory, plays its part. Films, television shows, and music videos constantly recycle Masonic imagery, not just for style, but for conditioning. The goal is normalization, to make the symbols so familiar that no one questions them. To make the architecture invisible. And yet, there are cracks in the temple. People are beginning to question, to connect the dots. Historians, whistleblowers, digital investigators, they are starting to realize that the great work may not be a path to enlightenment but a mechanism of control. Because if freedom exists only within the parameters of an algorithm, is it freedom at all? In the words of a former intelligence analyst, the ultimate illusion of the 21st century is that we're building technology. In truth, technology is building us. So, where does it end? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe the great work, the eternal building, was never meant to reach completion. The unfinished pyramid on the dollar bill, the symbol everyone sees every day, may not represent an ancient mystery at all. Maybe it's a promise that the work will continue, that the structure will always be in progress, until humanity itself becomes the perfect edifice. Perhaps that's why the eye above the pyramid never blinks. Because it's not watching from above anymore. It's watching from within, through every screen, every lens, every connected device. The builders have finally merged with their architecture. And just like the cathedrals of old, we keep entering their temples, willingly, daily, unaware that the walls are already built around us. So the next time you unlock your phone, scroll through your feed, or transfer money online, remember this. You are not just using the system. You are part of its design. The great work continues. The temple expands. And somewhere, deep in the hidden chambers of power, the builders still whisper the same ancient phrase they've spoken for centuries. As above, so below.